discuss the last but one chapter from the Bhagavad Gita. This chapter is called the divisions of faith. Shraddha, Traya, Vibhaga, Yoga. Three kinds of faith Lord Krishna describes in this chapter. And faith is something which is very fundamental to our existence. Every person in this world will have faith towards one or the other concept of life. If somebody says, I am a faithless person, I don't have faith in God, but he will have faith in his belief system that there is no God. That is also a kind of faith. So everybody has got some kind of faith. And faith, they say, can move mountains. Faith can move mountains. Faith can make impossible things possible. We have discussed earlier also, it's not that only in spiritual life we need faith. Even for our day-to-day existence in this material world, our transactions with people around us in this world, we need faith. Srila Prabhupada gives one example. Suppose you want to go to London, you book a ticket from the travel agency and you pay a lump sum money, and in return the travel agent gives you one piece of paper. He says, you bring this ticket on the day mentioned here on this ticket and flight will come and take you to London. So you cannot say, oh, first you show me London, then I will pay you the money. No, that is not possible. You have to follow a process. Oh, this is not a fake travel agency. Many people in the past have booked ticket through this travel agency. They have gone to London, they have come back, they have given their reviews about their experiences. That means it is not a fake travel agency. So that means there is some kind of a faith, there is some kind of a belief, and you book the ticket, and on the day mentioned on the ticket, you come to the airport, you will see the flight and you will actually board the flight. It will take you to London. This is called the process of faith and revelation. So our Krishna consciousness process is nothing but a process of faith and revelation. Just like the example of going to London, or even our example of getting a degree, getting admitted into a college. So the time when you get admitted into the college admission process says that you have to pay this much money as admission fees, and then you will get a seat in this particular college. You cannot say, first you give me the degree certificate, then I will pay. That is not going to be possible, it's not practical. So you have to pay the admission fees, get admitted into the college, 3 years or 4 years or whatever number of years that academic course is. You have to go through that course, you have to clear all the subjects, clear all the papers, and at the end of that academic term, you will be awarded the degree certificate. This is another example for faith and revelation. First you apply faith, follow the process, and then the result will be revealed to you at the end of the process. So this is the same process that is followed in the spiritual life also, in Krishna consciousness process also. We have faith in the instructions given by the spiritual master. We have faith in the instructions given in the scriptures. With whatever faith we have, we follow it, apply ourselves to the process, and then you will see that you are getting closer to the destination. You are getting closer to the perfection of your life. So this is the faith and revelation. So earlier already in the 9th chapter, Lord Krishna had said, Ashraddhadhana Purushaha Dharmasyasya Parantapa. He says, one who is Ashraddhadhana, one who has no faith, he will return back to this material world. That means one must have faith. Oh, Krishna is saying this. You render service to me, you become perfect, and you will come back to my spiritual abode. You can escape the cycle of birth and death. This is what Krishna is promising in the Bhagavad Gita. By taking up the process of Bhakti Yoga, we can attain perfection. But if somebody is ashraddha dhana, if somebody has no faith, then he actually does not make any tangible progress. So faith is so very important in our lives.
What about the person who are in doubt?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it doesn't have faith, but it is in doubt.
Yes, having doubts is a symptom of intelligent person. So one should not remain in doubts. One should clarify those doubts. So how to clarify the doubts? We have three standards: Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. We have to go to the right source, the bona fide source, and get our doubts clarified. Right? So that is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. 4th chapter he says this: Tatvidhi pranipadena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. We must go to a tattvadarshi, a person who has seen the truth, and place our doubts in front of him and get clarifications. So that is a very important thing to do. Because without clarity, you will not have enough determination and enthusiasm to march forward in the journey of your spiritual life. So you must place your questions, ask your questions and get clarified. Good. So let us begin this chapter. The first shloka, Arjuna uvacha ye shastra vidimutsrijya yajante shraddhayanvitaha teshar nishtha ka Krishna sattvamaho rajastamaha. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what is the situation of one who does not follow the principles of scripture but worships according to his own imagination? Is he in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance? So the connection, why Arjuna is asking this question? Because in the last shloka of the previous chapter, as we had discussed previously, Krishna said that we must study the scriptures and understand what should be done and what should not be done. And knowing those rules and regulations mentioned in the scriptures, one can make progress. This is what Krishna had told. So that is why Arjuna is asking a question. What if somebody has no faith in the scriptures? He does not follow the scriptural injunctions. What will happen to him? He also observes some kind of worship. Is he in Sattva Guna, Rajoguna, or Tamoguna? How do you classify? That is what Arjuna's question is. But one important thing to note, as Krishna said in the 23rd shloka of the previous chapter, Krishna said, if one does not follow the scriptural injunctions, but simply acts according to his own mind, his own whimsical mind, then such a person will neither attain perfection, nor happiness, nor he will attain the supreme destination. Three things he will not attain. This is what Krishna says. He will not attain siddhi, perfection. He will not attain sukham, happiness within this world. And he will not attain param gatim, the supreme destination. So faith is important. Faith in the scriptural knowledge, scriptural instructions is very important. So now let's see how Krishna answers these questions of Arjuna. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Trividha Bhavati Shraddha Dehinam Sasvabhavaja Satviki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Cheti Tam Shruno. The Supreme Lord said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: goodness, passion, or ignorance. Now hear about these. So already Krishna had explained about the effects of the three gunas. We have discussed in detail in the 14th chapter. There, what is the effect of Sattva Guna. People who are in Sattva Guna, they seek knowledge. People who are in Rajoguna, they are prone to quick actions without much thinking. That is Rajasic. They are driven by desires. And people who are in the mode of ignorance, they are lazy. So based on these three qualities, one's faith also is determined. Text 3. Sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddhamayoyam purusho yoya shraddhasa eva saha. According to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. So the three gunas, as we have discussed earlier in the 14th chapter, they influence every aspect of our life. The three gunas, every aspect of our life, our thinking, our choices, our food choices that we are going to see in this chapter, then our desires, our aspirations, the goals that we set in our life, then what kind of lifestyle we prefer, how we interact with people around us, all of these things are very much influenced by the three gunas. One cannot escape the three gunas unless one comes to the spiritual realization platform. It is not possible to escape the three gunas. So only when one becomes fully purified by engaging in devotional service, devotional activities, can one get release from the three gunas. Therefore, based on which guna is influencing us, our faith in a particular process of worship will also take shape. Right? So, for example, we will see there are certain faiths, maybe some tribal people in some forest or something, in the Amazon jungle, or maybe somewhere in African jungle, or maybe in our own country in some remote jungle. So they will have some method of worship, right? So, like for example, you might have seen, there are people who torture their bodies in the name of worshipping God. They take sharp objects, pierce their tongue, pierce their bodies, all these things. They're also having some kind of faith. That is also some kind of faith only. But that faith is predominated by tamoguna, tamasic. That's called tamasic worship, right? So, based on one's influence of the guna, one chooses a particular methodology of worship. Even if one is not referring to the scriptures, it is very common, it is an inner trait of every human being to have faith towards one or the other kind of supreme entity. Isn't it? So based on that person's guna, he chooses a particular kind of worship. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Text 4. Yajante satvika devan yaksha rakshamsi rajasaha pretan bhutaganamschanye yajante tamasa janaha. So in this shloka, Krishna is telling who worships whom. Men in the mode of goodness, sattvic people, worship the demigods, worship devatas. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. Now, people who are in the mode of sattva guna, yajante sattvika devan, devatas. Right? There are so many devatas described in the Vedic scriptures. So people who are in the mode of goodness, sattva guna, they take to the worship of devatas for fulfilling their desires. Say for example, somebody does Sola Somvar Vrat. It's very common, very famous in North India. So 16 Mondays they worship Lord Shiva. They will have certain particular desires. By the 16th week, Lord Shiva should satisfy those desires. Or somebody does Satyanarayana Katha at home, you know. So they say that if you do the Satyanarayana Katha, whatever difficulties you have will go away. And they do it on the full moon day. They conduct the festival in their house and they hear the Katha like that. So those who are in the mode of goodness, in order to fulfill their desires, they go for worshipping the devatas. They don't take a shortcut method, or they don't take a wrong method. Suppose if I have desire and you have a lot of money, so I can come to you and cheat you and take the money because I want a lot of money and I know you are there. And let's say you are a very vulnerable person, so I will somehow come manipulate you and I will cheat you and take the money. Now, a person who is in the mode of goodness will not do this. A person in the mode of goodness, because he is driven by values to a certain extent, he is also driven by knowledge. He thinks that I should not harm others, but in a righteous way I should gain whatever I want to gain. So therefore they take up the worship of the devatas. Right? Now, of course, they do it as a transaction. I will please the devata, and in return, devata should give me something. So that is the mode in which they worship. So they are generally the people in the mode of goodness. Now those who are in the mode of passion, it is said here, Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasaha. Those who are in the mode of passion, that is Rajoguna, they take to the worship of demons, it is said. Rakshamsi means demons. What do you mean by that? Already who are demons we have discussed in the previous chapter. Demons doesn't mean people who look very horrible and they have some horns and all. No. Demoniac people are those who say that I am God. I have power. And by my influence, by my power, I can control things around me. This we have seen in the previous chapter, isn't it? So, those who are very powerful people in this world, they are very powerful, they are very influential, they have wealth, they have money, they have followers. People who are in the mode of Rajoguna, they take to the worship of such people, such powerful personalities. Means they are not actually worshipping the Supreme Lord, they are not worshipping the Devatas also. But they say that, this person is our local MLA is very powerful. So whenever he calls for any meeting, we should go, we should please him. Whatever he does, whatever he says, we should do. So there will be some people like that, influential people. Hitler, for example, Prabhupada gives in the purport, we recall that during the Second World War, a man in Calcutta worshipped Hitler because thanks to that war, he had amassed a large amount of wealth by dealing in the black market. So somebody got, a businessman in Calcutta, he was favored because of the war situation. He made a lot of profits in the black market and he gave credits to Hitler because Hitler is the one who started the Second World War. So he considered Hitler to be God and he worshipped Hitler. Many times we also see some big politician or movie star or cricket star, people have big cutouts of those people in the public, pour milk on that person and put big garlands. These are all examples for people who are in Rajoguna. They worship such personalities. And then, Pretan Bhuta Ganamscha Anye Yajante Tamasa Janam. What about the tamasic people? Whom do they worship? They worship ghosts and spirits. Right? There are people who do some black magic and they believe in the dark energy and they take up such activities, right? So they are those in the mode of tamoguna. Now, if you see, just by hearing the descriptions of these three different kinds of worshippers, we can know what is first class, what is second class, what is third class. People who are doing this black magic, worshipping ghosts, they're definitely third class, right? They think that, I will worship some power, some ghost. That ghost will give me whatever I need. There are many such, especially stories in Arabian Nights, if you read, there are many such things, right? So, the point is, people, they have their own conception of worship, and what is influencing that conception? The three gunas. So, the three gunas determine our quality of faith. Okay, so we are talking about how to lead a first class life. Yes, everybody can lead whatever kind of life based on his faith. But what is first class? That already Krishna has mentioned in the previous chapter. That is to follow the standard regulations mentioned in the scriptures. That is first class life. Right? So if one does not follow the scriptural injunctions, but manufactures his own method of worship, then one simply becomes more and more bewildered. He's going far away from reality. So that is, and also he influences others also, which makes people also forget reality. So one should always, just like if you want to use any gadget, you will always refer to the manual that is accompanying the gadget. In the same way, if we want to get the best out of human life, we must refer to the manual, the scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita to lead our life. Okay, let's continue. Ashastra vihitam ghoram tapyante ye tapo janaha dambhahankara samyukta kamaraga balanvitaha karshayanta sharirastham bhutagramam achetasaha Mam chaivanta sharirastham tan vidhyasura nishchayan. So here Krishna is giving another definition of demons. Who are the demons? Ashastra vihitam ghoram tapyante ye tapo janaha. Those people who take up severe austerities and penances which are not recommended in the scriptures. They perform out of pride, egotism, lust and attachment. So they don't take the scriptural methods, they manufacture their own severe austerities and penances which are not recommended in the scriptures, and they do all these things out of pride, lust, attachment and ego, and they are impelled by passion, and they torture their bodily organs as well as the super soul dwelling within are to be known as demons. As I have told already, piercing the body. And nowadays, body piercing is a trend. So according to this shloka of Bhagavad Gita, those who are doing body piercing, they are actually in deep ignorance. They are actually tamoguna, tamasic. It's a trend, no? People do all kinds of piercing, they make reels out of it, so many. So, but Krishna is saying here, unnecessarily you are torturing your body. Tapasya is not simply torturing our body. Tapasya means accepting inconveniences which are recommended in the scriptures for the sake of spiritual advancement. For example, the scriptures recommend every 15 days on the Ekadashi day you observe fasting. Now this is an injunction of the scriptures. When you follow this according to the scriptural injunctions, you will make spiritual advancement. But this kind of, torturing the body. Some people walk on fire, some people, all these kind of things. Of course, we are not trying to belittle them. That is not our idea. But that is not what the scriptures are recommending. Scriptures don't recommend that you go walk on the fire, then you will attain something. No. Yes.
Devatas are also not God, right?
Yeah.
So why should we worship them? Not why should not we worship directly to God?
Yeah, we already discussed this point in the 7th chapter. Anyway, Devatas are not God. Correct point. Right point. Devatas are they are representatives of God who are authorized by God to take care of the universal management. Like Indra, Vayu, Varuna, they are all empowered by Krishna. Right? So Krishna again and again says you don't have to worship the Devatas, you worship me directly. But those who are in the mode of goodness, they take to the worship of Devatas. Just like, suppose you go to a bank. In the bank, we all know the most powerful authority is the bank manager. But the bank manager is not visible to everyone like that. He sits in his chamber behind. If there are any issues, then he will come into picture to settle those issues. But the staff you will be able to see. Somebody is helping you realize your checks. Somebody is making entries into your account, passbook. And especially there is a cashier sitting very prominently. And cashier deals with a lot of money. Isn't it? He is the one who is dealing with a lot of money. Whenever you go, cashier gives you money if you want to withdraw the money. Right? And he accepts money to be deposited into your account. So cashier is dealing with lot of money. Now let's say a villager or somebody who does not have understanding about the banking system, he comes to a bank for the first time in his life, right? He will think, oh my God, this cashier is the most important person in this bank. He is the most powerful person. Why? Because he is dealing with lot of money. Bank means money. And this cashier must be the topmost person in this bank because he is the one who is dealing with money. But we know that is not a fact. The cashier is merely acting under the bank manager, branch manager. Isn't it? So in the same way, the Devatas, when we see Devatas are wielding lot of power, right? Oh, there is Indra who is controlling rain. There is Varuna who is controlling water bodies. There is Vayu who is controlling the movement of wind. So when we see these Devatas, we think, oh, these are all very powerful. These are the people who are actually supreme. We think like that. But the scriptures, if you study, you will understand that all these are empowered by the Supreme Lord. So those who are in the mode of goodness, they get attracted to Devatas. Okay? Well, because they are very powerful. They have a logic for that. Because mode of goodness means people who work through knowledge, through logic. See, Devatas are having a lot of power because they are making changes in day-to-day life. They have that power. So they get attracted. But Krishna says one should transcend even Sattva Guna that we have discussed previously. Right? Sattva Guna is the best among the three. Because in Sattva Guna, you seek knowledge, you seek clarity. But one must actually transcend the three gunas. Sagunam samatityaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. 14th chapter towards the end, Krishna says this. We have discussed. When Arjuna asks how to become free from the influence of the three gunas. What are the symptoms of a person who has actually become free from the influence of the three gunas? Krishna gives a list of those symptoms and finally he says, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. He says, if you engage in undivided devotional service unto me, unto Krishna, the Supreme Lord, then you can become free from the influence of all the three gunas and you can come to the Brahma Bhuta platform or spiritual platform. Right? This is what Krishna is saying. So it is very clear as far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned. Bhagavad Gita is not endorsing Devata worship. Bhagavad Gita is not belittling the other modes of worship, the Rajasic or Tamasic. Right? Bhagavad Gita is saying that at least come to Sattva Guna, understand the philosophy, and then practice Krishna consciousness or devotional service. by which you can even transcend the Sattva Guna. Because even if one is situated in Sattva Guna, one is obliged to take birth again in the material world. Right? That we have seen already in the 14th chapter. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha madhyam tishtanti rajasaha jaganya gunavrittistha ado gachanti tamasa. Krishna says, if one dies, one quits his body, being in the mode of Sattva Guna, then he gets birth in higher planetary systems within this material world, where he gets better body, he gets a Devata body, where he can engage in sense enjoyment for a longer duration of time, without many miseries. Old age and disease will be very less there, not like here. So it is a better situation, right? Just like America is a better situation compared to India, economically. So that's why people want to go to America. It's a land of opportunities, they say. Right? In the same way, Swargaloka is like a land of opportunities for sense enjoyment, higher degrees of sense enjoyment, uninterrupted sense enjoyment. But even if one is in Sattva Guna, that means by being in Sattva Guna, one maximum one can get is higher planetary systems. That means again he is taking birth. You cannot become free from the influence of, you cannot become free from the cycle of birth and death. So Krishna again and again repeats, if you want to become free from the cycle of birth and death, you must transcend the three gunas. Nistray gunyo bhavarjuna. You should become free from the influence of the three gunas. And how to become free from the influence of the three gunas? By taking to pure devotional service, by taking to Krishna consciousness. This point is again and again brought about in the Bhagavad Gita.
People with other two gunas like Tamas Guna and Rajas Guna cannot worship God?
No, it's not that they cannot. Their natural inclination will be that let me worship this ghost only. They are only God for me. They are driven by that kind of a desires. Because their consciousness is influenced by the three gunas, by that particular guna. So human life should be how to become free from the influence of lower gunas and come to Sattva Guna at least. When one comes to Sattva Guna, he is called a Brahmana. Brahmana means one who has knowledge. It's not nothing to do with birth. One who has right understanding, clarity is called Brahmana. And being a Brahmana, one must practice bhakti. After coming to that stage of Brahminical status, one must practice bhakti. Then one can transcend the influence of the three gunas.
But as you told yesterday in class also that if we are doing something forcefully, but once the opportunity hits us, then we directly bounce.
Yeah.
Like you told, gave the example of that particular person also, he was in ashram for many years.
Rishyashringa.
Yes, but once the opportunity came, he just bounced actually.
Yeah, what's your name?
So, yeah.
What's your name?
My name is Niket.
Niket.
Yes.
Acha, good.
So the problem is like we are not able to understand whether we have come out of all these three and we have transcended to the higher order or not, because once the opportunity comes to us, then we will get ignorant and we will just leave everything and we try
True.
to do it. Then how to
For that-
and you are telling that we have to just chant, but in chanting also we don't know whether we are doing it with our actual heart or not. So
Yeah,
how
true,
to-
true.
How to answer all this?
Yeah. So, you are a PhD?
Just join it.
Just joined. Acha. That's what I was wondering. Where were you all these days? Okay, good. So, good question. Can we switch on this fan? Is it not working? So, the point is, yes, we have to, first step is, we have to purify our consciousness. If our consciousness is not purified, we may physically abstain, but desire is still there. So it will go. The moment that comes, we'll pounce on it. Correct? So pehle kya karna hai? We have to purify our consciousness. Our desires should become purified. There are some philosophers who say you should become desireless. But it's not possible. It's not practical. We are not stone. We are soul. The living symptom is we have the ability to desire. So you cannot become zero, desireless. but you can purify the quality of your desires. So, how to purify the quality of desires? The best process recommended is chanting the holy names. The holy names are not different from Krishna. So when you chant Krishna, when you chant Rama, you are directly getting in touch with Krishna and Rama. So therefore it purifies us. But it will take time. It will not happen overnight. We may say, oh, why? God is so powerful, purifying. No, immediately it should happen. Why you are saying it is not happening immediately? It is because first we have to train our desiring ability. There is one example given in the Bhagavatam. Kunjara Shaucha, elephant bath. What does elephant do when it finds water? It goes nicely for hours together, it will take bath. But the moment elephant comes back on the land, it sees some dust, mud. It will splash its whole body with mud. So what happened to all that 2-hour-long bath, elaborate bath? What happened? What is the use? We are doing like that. Yeah, when we go to temple, very nicely, intensely we pray, bhakti, we chant God's name. But when we come back, again back to square one. We are putting dust, so much material things. That is why our progress is slow. Some progress is there, but it is very, very slow. The day we stop that splashing mud, then your pakka realized. So bhakti is training our free will. Each one of us have got free will. How to choose only those things which are favorable for bhakti. We have to choose that. For that training is required. Simply hearing is not sufficient. Of course, hearing is important, is the first step. One must be ready to get trained under a devotee. When one gets trained, then one will know how to use his free will favorably. Then that mud splashing will not happen, or it will slowly reduce. So it will take time. So training is required. Is it okay? We'll discuss more.
Are desires driven by these three gunas?
Yes, very much.
Then if you can't be undesirable,
Yes.
then how can we detach from three gunas?
So at least come to Sattva Guna first.
But we will be in the cycle of...
No, that's okay. You come to Sattva Guna. Don't degrade to Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Rajoguna and Tamoguna activities will take you away from reality more and more. At least come to Sattva Guna. How to come to Sattva Guna? By avoiding 4 kinds of sinful activities. These are called 4 pillars of sin. Every other sinful activity is an offshoot of these 4. That is described in the scriptures. Meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. These 4, if we avoid these 4 sinful activities, that means you are in Sattva Guna. So very simple. If you are avoiding these 4, initially at least physically avoid. Mentally desire may be there, that's okay. But at least physically abstain. No, I will not do these 4. And then you start chanting Hare Krishna mantra, the holy names of the Lord. Hear Bhagavad Gita from devotee, satsanga. This purification will happen. Even that mental desiring will go away.
So the Pandavas were not in Sattva because they were chanting and led to the path.
Yeah, in fact, the Mahabharata teaches us what we should not do. Right? What we should not do. Mahabharata is teaching that. So, the ill effects of gambling, very nicely it is highlighted in Mahabharata. Right? Anyway, that's a different story. But the point is, we must come to Sattva Guna by giving up these 4 sinful activities, physically at least. Okay, let's continue. So those who torture their bodies, Krishna is saying, Not only do they torture their bodies, when they torture their bodies like that, by thinking that they are worshipping, they are actually torturing the Paramatma within their body also. The Paramatma within their body is also, he is also not happy with this kind of, oh, such a nice human body you have got, I have given you, and you are simply piercing your body, and you are thinking this is worship. You know, Paramatma is also unhappy with that kind of a worship, tamasic worship. Next, Krishna talks about the food in the three gunas. See, first class life means it includes so many things. How do you know you are leading a first class life? First, faith. It started with faith. Krishna talked about three kinds of faith. Because what is your faith? What is there in your mind, that is going to come out in the form of actions in your life. So therefore, first class life means first you should come to first class faith. Next is first class food also you should take. Right? So here Krishna is talking about three classes of food. Aharastvapi sarvasya trivido bhavati priyaha. Text 7. Yajnas tapas tatha danam tesham bhedamimam shrunu. Even food of which all partake is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. The same is true of sacrifices, austerities and charity. Listen and I shall tell you of the distinctions of three of these. Ayu sattva balarogya sukha priti vivardhana rasya snigdha sthira hridya ahara satvika priyaha. So sattvic food. What is sattvic food? The food that increases one's duration of life. Ayuhu. The food, it has to increase the duration of your life. And then balarogya, bala, it should give you strength. Arogya, it should make you free from roga, diseases. Sukha, it should give happiness. Preeti, satisfaction. When all these things are increasing, that is called sattvic food. And sattvic food is rasya, it is juicy. Snigdaha, it has fats. Fats are also required for the body. Understood? Sthiraha, hridyaha, it is pleasing to the heart. This is called sattvic food. As I was telling last week, many people think sattvic food means it should be some tasteless, pale food, some patient food that is given to some government patient in the government hospital, that kind of food. That is not sattvic food. That is not the meaning of sattvic food. Sattvic food is tasty. It should be tasty. It should not be too spicy. When it becomes too spicy, it will become rajasic food. Understood? So, if it has all these qualities, that it enhances your health, increases the duration of your existence, of your life, and it is good for your health. All tasty food need not be healthy food. And all healthy food sometimes may not be tasty. Right? Correct, no? Now, for example, they say karele ka juice you have to drink. Now, it is not very tasty, palatable to the tongue, but it is good for your health. Okay, gobi Manchurian, which is very famous among the youth, which is a very nice snack, evening snack, morning snack, all snacks they eat. In the roadside they'll be cooking, they'll be selling in the evening, and chats and all, Chinese food and all, and so much they'll put spices, and especially gobi Manchurian they do deep fry. We don't know that oil, in how many janmas they have been using the same oil, we don't know. And people go and eat this kind of food just to satisfy the tongue. It may be satisfying the tongue, but it is not good for your stomach. It's not good for your body. So that we have to keep in mind. Something which gives you immediate pleasure can also give you long-term pain. Right? So Krishna talks about this in the 5th chapter. Right? That is what? The sense pleasure is very appealing. It gives immediate enjoyment. But that is going to give you dukkha in the long run. If you are intelligent, you will not go for instant gratification. That's what Krishna says. So that's a symptom of a person in Sattva Guna. He will not go for instant pleasure. Okay, the next one. Katvam lavanatyushna tikshna ruksha vidahinaha ahara rajasa sheshta dukkha shokamaya pradaha. So what is this rajasic food, second class food? It is katu amla. It is very sour. Pani puri. The moment we think there is, people will say, "Muh mein pani aa raha hai." It is so sour, isn't it? And that is called katu amla. Katu means bitter, amla means sour. And then lavana, too salty. Ati ushna, very hot. Fried rice, they say, right? Fried rice and with lot of this thing, lot of chili they put. Ati ushna, very hot. And then tikshna, pungent. Very tikshna means very sharp tastes. Ruksha, which is dry. Vadinaha, burning. It creates a burning sensation when you eat it. No, they say no, it is chest is burning. After eating that, so that is vadina. This ahara is called rajasaha, and it is dukkha shoka amaya pradaha. Dukkha, it gives distress. Shoka, misery, right? Amaya prada. Amaya means disease. It brings diseases. That is rajasic food. So rajasic food are those. Rajasic people are those who want. There should be too spicy. It should be. Maza nahi aaya khane mein. Mirchi abhi dalo, more mirchi you put, like that. So that is rajasic food. Then yatayamam gatarasam poti paryushitam chayat uchishtam api chamedhyam bhojanam tamasa priyam. Very interesting. So what is this tamasa priyam? Tamasic people, what is their menu? Krishna is giving here. Yatayamam, food that is cooked 3 hours before being eaten. Old food. Okay. Gata rasam, tasteless. The taste has gone away from that. Gata rasam. Puti, it is bad smelling. Paryushitam, it is decomposed. Especially in meat. The moment the animal is slaughtered, the flesh starts decomposition. The decomposition starts the moment the flesh is exposed to the atmospheric air. So it is paryushitam, it is decomposed. Uchishtam, uchishtam means remnants of food eaten by others. This is very important. Especially, nowadays there is no such kind of a consideration. Everybody sits in the same plate, they eat from the same plate. We are friends. We will follow till hell. Friends forever, So that is not the way to express friendship. Oh, I will eat your jhuta. No, there is a karma transfer which happens when you eat somebody's jhuta food, right? So we should not do that. Is tamasic food, uchishtam. Cha amedhyam. Amedhyam means food that is untouchable. This kind of bhojanam is tamasa priyam. The tamasic people like this kind of bhojana, this kind of food. So, slaughterhouses, Prabhupada is talking about that in the purport. There are 2 ways in which you can take animal fat. One is through the milk. You can take. Milk is a very natural food. It is very, very nutritious. You can take. But the tamasic people, instead of drinking milk of the cow, they prefer killing the cow and eating its flesh. So that is a choice. So if you are sattvic, you will take milk. If you are tamasic, you want to eat the flesh. And one common reason that people give is vegetarians don't get enough protein. Protein is present only in the meat. Therefore, we should eat meat. No, it is not. It is not true. There are a lot of research works which are being conducted, which says that nuts, dry fruits, dal, soya bean, these are all very good sources of excellent proteins, complete proteins. So therefore, it is not true. It is not true that if you are vegetarian, you will lack energy, you will become weak, you will get protein deficiency. That is not the case. So these are the three kinds of food. Now in all the three, what is the best? Sattvic is the best, right? So we have to come to Sattvic. Now, why Sattvic food is best? That we already saw. It is good for your health, long term. It is going to increase your duration of your life also. It gives you happiness also. See, the food that you eat not only affects your bodily health, it also affects your consciousness. This is very important. This many people do not know. There is a lot of research done, interconnection between food and food-mood relationships. People who are prone to eat a lot of spicy food, there are a lot of chances that they get quickly irritated. They have a short temper, bad temper. There have been a lot of case studies. I'm not simply saying because I have to tell now Bhagavad Gita. No, there has been a lot of research conducted. So there is a connection between the food that you eat and your state of consciousness. It's very much influenced. So it's not simply to make muscles. Food that you are eating should also give you good consciousness. If ahara is not shuddha, then our sattva will not be shuddha. Our existence will not be shuddha. So if you want shuddha existence, you should take shuddha ahara. So does it mean that if somebody is 100% pure vegetarian, so he will have shuddha sattva, shuddha existence? The answer is no. Because even when somebody takes 100% shuddha shakahari food, that food also comes as a result of some kind of a violence to plants. It is there. Jivo jivasya jivanam. That is the principle. In this material world, one living entity is a food for another living entity. That's how the food chain, food web is designed. But that means even if somebody is Shuddha Shakahari, it will not be a karma-free diet. Still there is karma involved in it. And you have to suffer the consequences for that. So how to become free from that karma? That already Krishna has told in the 9th chapter. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati. Krishna says, these 4 categories of food, patram, pushpam, phalam, toyam. Fruits, patram means leaves, pushpam means flowers, patram, pushpam, phalam means fruits and vegetables, toyam means water and milk. These 4 categories of food can be offered to me, and then you can take that food. Then it becomes karma free. This is called prasadam. So prasadam means what? The food that is first offered to the Lord. Sattvic food, which is prepared with love and devotion, offered to God, and then you accept. That is called karma-free diet or prasadam. So that is the way. It is super sattvic. The food which is offered to the Lord, prasadam, is above sattvic, right? That is transcendental.
So we should not eat spinach because spinach,
Spinach.
then we are derooting it from the wrong vegetable.
No.
Likewise, some other plants are there which for eating them we have to deroot from.
That's why there is a way to eat that. As you said, when you take spinach, you are killing the whole plant itself. Or if any green leafy vegetables, that is the case. So, but that is sattvic food. That is your designated food for human beings. There is no problem. But if you eat it without offering to God, then you get karma.
Because you told that we are taking plant-like, but if we eat mango, then it's automatically detaching the fruits from itself. So
Whatever it is,
it is not taking anybody's.
whatever kind of Sattvic food is designated for human beings. Okay, whether it is plucking the fruit or whether it is uprooting the whole plant, whatever it is. But one has to offer it to God and then accept it. Then it becomes karma free. It becomes karma free. See, nowadays people follow all kinds of inorganic methods of cultivation. Even if you say apple or a mango, I'm only plucking the fruit. Anyway, the tree is going to give you the fruit. It will fall down on its own. So I'm only plucking. But what all has been done to cultivate the tree? There's a lot of karma involved there. Pesticides, and you're killing so many other living entities. So when you are eating a mango, all that karma is there with the mango. And since you are buying the mango and you are eating, you will get the karma reaction. So it is not so easy to escape karma in this material world. Right? You will get, even if you are a Shuddha Shakahari, you will get karma. That is why Krishna is saying, you follow this method. This is called yajna. Yajna means, whatever I have, I offer to God. And I thank God for giving me whatever it is a way of expressing our gratitude. You are the one who has given me this food. First you please, Tvameva vastu govindam tubhyameva samarpayet. It is said, it is your vastu, Govinda, you have given me this food. Now I want to express my gratitude by offering it to you.
But like in society, people are misusing this concept of first offering to God. Like people are cutting and slaving the goats and they are offering.
That's why I am telling very clearly. You didn't hear me properly. Krishna is saying Patram, Pushpam, Phalam, Toyam. These 4 categories of food you can offer to me. Krishna is not saying chickenum, muttonum, porkum, fishum you offer to me. He's not saying. So there are two things. One is your designated food. Second is eating it in the prescribed manner. Both are important. Both should be there. Designated food is Patram, Pushpam, Phalam, Toyam. And how to eat that prescribed method is offer it to God and then have it. When you follow this, then you are karma free. Otherwise, even a 100% vegetarian will be bound by karma. Okay, let's continue. So, next Krishna is talking about the different kinds of yajnas. Abhala kamshibhir yajno vidhi drushto ihyate yashtavyam eveti manaha samadhaya sa satvikaha. 3 kinds of yajnas. Of sacrifices, that sacrifice performed according to duty and according to scriptural rules and with no expectation of reward is of the nature of goodness. Right? We will read all the 3 and then discuss. Abhisandhayatu phalam dambhartam api chaivayat ijyate bharata shreshta tam yajnam vidhi rajasam. But that sacrifice performed for some material end or benefit or performed ostentatiously out of pride is of the nature of passion, O chief of the Bharatas. Vidhihinam asrushtanam mantrahinam adakshinam shraddha virahitam yajnam tamasam parichakshate. And that sacrifice performed in defiance of scriptural injunctions, in which no spiritual food is distributed, no hymns are chanted, and no remunerations are made to the priests, and which is faithless, that sacrifice is of the nature of ignorance. So yajna is also of 3 types. Sattvic yajna, Rajasic, Tamasic. So Sattvic yajna is the yajna which is performed according to the scriptural injunctions. And the yajna which is performed without any expectation of reward as a matter of duty when it is performed. Now yajna doesn't mean simply having one fireplace and putting the things into that fire. That is one layman's understanding about yajna. But what is actually the meaning of yajna? Yajna means the activities which are done to please God. That is yajna. The Yajurveda says, Yajno vai Vishnu. Yajna means worshipping Lord Vishnu. That is called yajna. Right? Now sometimes people do yajna, worship of the Lord, without any expectation in return. That is first class worship. Second class worship is that which is done out of pride. See, I am so rich, I can do such puja, big puja, out of pride, for publicity. That is second class worship, mode of passion. And those worship which is done without reference to the scriptures, however one wants, one does, then it is called tamasic worship. See, one important thing here it is mentioned, Annam. In all our Vedic festivals, there is distribution of food which is recommended. So if somebody does a festival, it's not that he should nicely, deliciously cook food in his own house and eat nicely. He should go and at least give to another one more person. Distribute food. Right? Annadana, that is recommended. So if Annadana is not done and simply somebody celebrates festival, then it is called tamasic festival. There is no distribution of, and there is no charity also. See, charity means what? What is charity? Giving, sharing our fruits of our action with somebody who can use it for a better purpose. That is called charity. No, don't think that, okay, somebody is on the street, he is smoking bidi, and also he is begging. Oh, so he says, I want money. He will take your money and he will smoke bidi. And you will get karma reaction for that. Even though you are not smoked, you will get. Suppose somebody uses that money for some illicit activity. Through your money he is using. Then you are also going to get karma reaction for that. So, one has to give charity to the right person. After ascertaining that this person is in knowledge and whatever money I am giving to him, he is going to use it for the right purpose, then you can give. So that is sattvic charity. That also comes in the, Krishna says that. So, worship of the Lord should be done accompanied with dana, annadana and charity. Then it is sattvic. If these two things are missing, it is rajasic, it is tamasic. Right? Now the austerity of the body consists in, now Krishna, very important, the next three shlokas. There are three karana. Karana means instruments. We have three main instruments. They are called three karana. Kaya, Vacha, Manasa. We say, right? Kaya means body. Vacha means words. Manasa means mind. So Krishna is saying how to utilize these three things properly. Any activity you are going to do, it involves these three faculties. You are going to use your body, you are going to use your mind, you are also going to use your speech. Now these three things have to be properly utilized. So what is proper utilization of these three things? Krishna is talking about this. So austerity of the body, first of all. Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam Shaucham Arjavam Brahmacharyam Ahimsacha Shariram Tapa Uchyate. So how to perform tapasya of the sharira, of the body? Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam. The first thing is, we have to use our body to bow down in front of our superiors. This is very important. In the Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, this point comes. Lord Rama, he is always very conscious of this. Whenever he sees somebody who is superior to him. Now superiority can come in there are different ways of understanding different types of superiority. The basic one is by age. By age, if somebody is elder to me, he is called Vayo Vruddha. Vruddha means one who has attained Vriddhi. Vriddhi means increase. His age is more than me. Therefore, he is called superior to me by age. Such people are called Vayo Vruddha. Now, there are people who are superior to me by knowledge. They are called Jnana Vruddha. Jnana Vruddha. There are people who are superior to me by tapasya. They are called Tapo Vruddha. So there is Vayovriddha. So in the everywhere in metro, everywhere they say no senior citizens के लिए आप seat छोड़िए. So at least one level of Vriddha they are recognizing in today's society. Okay, at least senior by birth, senior by age, somebody is older, senior citizen, you should make him sit, you should not stand. That is one level of civic sense. But the Vedic scriptures say, Ramayana says, that is only a very basic level of recognizing somebody's superiority. Age is, everybody gets age, no? What is a big deal in that? One day all of us will become old. We'll all become senior citizens one day, isn't it? But what is more important is Jnana Vriddha. Suppose if there are two people, one is senior by age, the other one is senior by knowledge. Then according to the etiquettes of the Vedic scriptures, one should give more respect to the person who is senior by knowledge. Even though he may be junior by age. So by age factor is not the only, age is pertaining to the body, that's all. Right? So one who is senior by knowledge, he is given more respect. Another one is by position. Suppose somebody is a king, somebody is a prime minister or president of a country. Let's say the prime minister is 30 years old and there is a senior citizen 65 years old. That senior citizen 65 years old person should go and show his respect to that person who is occupying that position of prime minister or king or whatever, because their position supersedes the age. So first is age, above age is position, above position is knowledge, above knowledge is tapasya or realization. So there is a hierarchy in which one should show respect to individuals. So that is what it is. And we should use our body to show respect. How? By bowing down. By bowing down. In the olden days, temples used to be very huge, but the entrance to the temple would be very small or short. So that everybody, at least for the sake of entering the temple, should bow down and enter. Not that like this, with pride I will enter the temple. No, bow down. So our culture is there. No? Whenever we see elders, we touch their feet. That we should bow down properly. Nowadays people do it in a very cinematic way. Just they pretend to touch. They're not bowing down. So here Krishna is saying, Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam. That is tapasya of the body. Use your body to bow down in front of your superiors. And then, who are the superiors? Here it is said, Deva, worship of the Supreme Lord. Dvija, the Brahmanas who are learned, more learned than me. Guru, the spiritual master. Pujanam, we have to engage in worship of them. And then, superiors like father and mother, that is also included. Prajna, right? Shaucham, cleanliness is another austerity of the body. Arjavam, simplicity, simple living, high thinking. Not that we always wear branded clothes. We put so much emphasis for branded clothes, branded perfume, branded accessories we use. But our thinking is all local. Dress is branded, thinking is lower than local. That is not good. So, Arjava means simplicity. We are simple in our dress, right? Brahmacharyam, this is very important. Practicing celibacy. This is Shariram tapa uchyate. Brahmacharyam means what? Brahmat charati brahmacharya. One who is always engaged in spiritual activities, he is called brahmachari. And if one wants to engage himself in spiritual activities, one has to be pure in mind. Pure in mind. And he should be free from lusty desires. And that is why the Vedic culture says, Matravat Paradaryeshu. The training in the Vedic culture is every man is trained to see women as mother, addressing women as mother. This is the culture of civilized human beings. Right? So that is brahmacharya. Every woman is my mother. That should be the vision. That is brahmacharya.
Some people misinterpret that brahmacharya means not getting married. Some people say that.
Not getting married. After getting married, also one should follow brahmacharya. Right? Brahmacharya doesn't mean simply not getting married. Even if somebody is married, one must continue to follow the principles of brahmacharya. It's not that now I got married, I got license for unrestricted enjoyment. No, at least according to the Vedic system, marriage is not simply meant for physical needs. So marriage is meant for spiritual advancement. We will talk about it on some other time. But brahmacharyam is recommended. This brahmacharyam comes again and again in the Bhagavad Gita also, in the Bhagavatam also it comes. In the 6th chapter when Krishna is talking about the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, there also brahmacharya has come. So brahmacharya is a very important principle. So brahmacharya is purity of vision, purity of thoughts, purity of actions. Okay? Ahimsa, non-violence. These are all the austerities of the body. Now next one, Krishna is talking about austerity of speech. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyaya abhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate. So what is tapasya of speech? You should speak anudvega karam. You should speak words which do not offend others. Right? And then anudvega karam vakyam satyam, speaking truth. Priyahitam, which is beneficial for others. Swadhyaya abhyasanam, using your power of speech to study the scriptures and to chant the holy names. That is swadhyaya. And this is called vanmaya tapa. This is called austerity of the speech. So, the story of this triple filter I had told some time back. Anyone remember? Triple filter test. Socrates was approached by somebody and he said, I have some interesting news for you. Please listen, pay attention. And Socrates said, okay, before I listen to what you say, it should pass my triple filter test. If it is passing, then I will listen to what you say. First thing he said is the filter of truthfulness. Is it truth what you are going to tell about me? Apparently that person had come to tell something about the neighbor. And he said, I don't know, it's just a rumor I heard. I thought it's an exciting news I want to tell you. A lot of people have such exciting news. They want to be like news channels say, breaking news. Our channel only first time it is coming. We are the first channel to break this news like that. Whenever we come across such gossips and rumors, we want to be the first people to break that news and we want to create some hype about it. So he said, I'm not sure whether it is true or not. Then he said, first filter only you have failed. Okay, anyway, second filter. Whether it is good, you're going to talk something good about that person. No, it is something negative only. Then he said, second filter also you have failed. Third filter, at least let us check. Whether it is useful for me or for you, whatever you're going to speak. He said, I don't know, I'm not sure. Then he said, whatever news you have brought, it has failed all the three filters. Better you please go away from this place. Don't tell me anything. So the point is, just because we have ability to speak doesn't mean we can keep speaking anything and everything. Right? We have to mind our own business. That is most important. Isn't it? Simply we want to keep talking about others. In their house it happened like this. In this happened like that. So we should not simply waste our time. So in the Vedic scriptures, there is one example given. In the rainy season, frog is there, no? Frog becomes very happy when it rains. And it starts dancing and croaking. It starts producing sound. Have you seen? It is enjoying. Oh, it is raining, nice enjoyment. But actually, its croaking is only inviting death. It invites the snake. Snake comes and eats it, gone. So the scriptures say, if one uses his power of speech simply to talk about material topics, but does not use his power of speech to glorify Krishna, to chant his holy names, then he is just like that croaking frog. Death, the snake of death will come and gone. Govinda will happen. That is why Shankaracharya said, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Mudamate, Samprapte, Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshati, Drukun Karane. He said, O Mudhamati, O foolish fellow, what are you talking? You're only always talking about some grammar, something and all. What is the use of this scholarly knowledge? You Bhaja Govindam, you chant the name of Govinda. 3 times he's saying, to repeat, to stress the importance of it. If the death comes, this rules of grammar, your great scholarly knowledge is not going to save you. Only Govinda can save you. So therefore chant the name of Govinda. So we should use our power of speech to chant the holy names of the Lord. One last shloka we'll discuss, and rest of the shlokas we'll discuss in the next session. Manah prasada saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava samshuddhirityeta tapo manasam uchyate. What is manasika tapasya? What is the tapasya of the mind? Mana prasadaha. First thing is satisfaction. One should be satisfied with what one has. It is very important. So one should be satisfied with what one has. One should understand that, yes, I should put my efforts to the best of my ability. I will put efforts, and whatever God sanctions, I'll accept it as prasadam, mercy of God. Otherwise, there is no end for desires, no? Correct? If you have this much, you want that much. If you get that much, you want more and more. Ye dil mange more. There is no end to that more. So therefore, we have to learn how to be satisfied with what one has. Yadrucha lava santushtaha. Santushta means we have to be satisfied. So, saumyatvam, one should be saumya. Saumya means gentle. It also means one should be free from duplicity. One should not be duplicitous. What does duplicity means? What is duplicity? Huh? Multiple character. What is that? What does it mean? Yes. That is opposite of simplicity. Duplicity. Whenever it is favorable to me, I will give big lecture about good character. But in my own life, I will not follow. Or in one situation, I will say this is correct. In another situation, I will say, no, that is not correct. This is correct. Something else is correct. So according to convenience, that is called duplicity. That one should not do. Maunam. Maunam means one should be grave. Maunam doesn't mean you take Mauna Vrata and don't talk at all. Because already Krishna has told in the previous shloka that you should use your power of speech for chanting the Vedic scriptures, for chanting the holy names. It's not that we should be Maunam. Maunam means you should not talk nonsense. That doesn't mean. That is also an austerity. One should be grave. And then loose talks one should not do. That is called gravity. Loose talks, simply for the sake of talking something, just like that. Then Atma Vinigraha, self-control. One should have self-control. And then Bhava Samshuddhihi, purity of thoughts, purification of thoughts. This is what yesterday we were talking about. If your thoughts are not pure, externally simply avoiding sense enjoyment will not work. Because the thoughts will again compel us to do that. So purity of thoughts How to attain purity of thoughts? By always fixing our mind on Krishna. This point again and again Krishna says, Man mana, think of me. Invest your mind on me. The best way to think about Krishna is like we are all doing now. We are trying to read the instructions of Krishna and try to meditate on them. This is one way of thinking about Krishna. Chanting of the holy names, very pure, very, very powerful process. That is another way of thinking about Krishna. In this way, our mind should be absorbed in spiritual topics. Right? You hear about Krishna's activities, you read about Krishna's instructions, you chant his holy names. In this way, the mind is always absorbed in spiritual topics. Then our desires will become purified. Our mind will become purified. So Krishna consciousness is a process of inner purification. So these are all the austerities of the mind. So we'll close here. Any questions anyone has based on what we discussed? Yeah.
So, regarding this 3 modes of food.
Huh?
3 modes of food.
3 types of foods. Okay.
So when this which category prasadam comes, let's say 3 hours old,
Yeah.
and it's eaten by others.
Yeah. So prasadam is transcendental. It is above sattva guna. So sattvic food means, here it is said food, tamasic food, no? Food that is cooked, eaten more than 3 hours after it is being cooked. Then it is called tamasic food. But that doesn't apply to prasadam because it's already offered to the Lord. The Lord has accepted it. It has become transcendental. So prasadam is transcendental. It is above the 3 gunas. In fact, the Padma Purana says, very interestingly it says, the Mahaprasadam of the Lord, even if it is touched by a dog, it is still transcendental. Right? It is mentioned, Padma Purana says that. And then it is said, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is quoted, Prapti matrena bhoktavyam. As soon as you receive prasadam, prapti matrena, immediately, bhoktavyam, you should honor it, you should eat it, prasadam. And prasadam can be in any situation. One should immediately accept prasadam. Oh, Prabhu, what is it? Somebody gives me stale laddu, Tirupati laddu, it is already gone bad. Now, yes, it is transcendental, but I am not in that transcendental consciousness. Therefore, we can at least offer our respects to that laddu. It's prasadam, it's offered to the Lord. But right now my body is not in a situation, my mind is not in a situation to accept it, to eat it. So I will discard it in a place which is proper. I may not eat it, but at least I'll show my respect, honor it. That should be done. So the moment the sattvic food is offered to the Lord, it actually is transcendent. Right? Any other question?
How we understand it is actually transcendental, because it depends on intention of somebody who is not actually in intention of offering anything, but for the sake of publicity and all, just the WhatsApp photo or it is offering it and is giving to so many devotees. So do we consider that particular thing also as actually prasadam, because intention may not be and lastly therefore publicity.
Okay.
Then how we consider it as prasadam?
Yeah. See, if the right process is followed, prasadam has to be offered to God through the spiritual master, through the medium of the Guru. If that process is followed, whoever offers it, if he is a devotee, Krishna will accept it and it becomes prasadam. Krishna will not accept from a non-devotee. He may prepare chappan bhog and offer. Krishna will not accept. Just like Krishna did not accept the chappan bhog offered by Duryodhana. Instead, he went to Vidura's house and accepted simple food because Vidura is a devotee. So if one is a devotee and one follows the right process, Krishna accepts it, then it is prasadam. You can accept it. Is it okay?
So if actually that person is not a devotee, he can call a devotee and that it
Yes.
accepted as a prasadam.
Yeah. If one is not a devotee, but the cook is a devotee, and he asks the devotee to offer it to Krishna, then Krishna will accept. Right? But there are some rules and regulations to be observed while cooking. One should not taste in between while cooking. All those things have to be, proper hygiene has to be maintained. Then, most importantly, consciousness is important while cooking. Okay, so we will now read 2 pages from this biography of Srila Prabhupada, as we have been doing every week. So request all of you to please pay attention. After this, we shall chant 1 round of Hare Krishna mantra. Can we will meet in the 9:30 session. So, we are reading from Prabhupada, the Messenger of the Supreme Lord, first chapter, Struggling Alone. We had read, we will continue to read. Bhaktivedanta Swami knew no one in New York City. I think this we have read. The Ramurthy Mishra, the yoga teacher in whose room Prabhupada had stayed in the beginning. So about him. So he is recalling. It is not bread he gave me. He gave me prasadam. Have you read this? Okay. We'll read from there. It is not bread he gave me. He gave me prasadam. This was life, and he saved my life. At that time, I was not sure I would live, but his habit to eat on time, whether I was hungry or not, that I very much liked. He'd get up and say, "All right, this is Bhagavat Prasada," and I would say, "All right." Bhaktivedanta Swami would sometimes discuss with Dr. Mishra the aim of his visit to America, expressing his spiritual master's vision of establishing Krishna consciousness in the West. He requested Dr. Mishra to help him, but Dr. Mishra would always refer to his own teaching work, which kept him very busy, and to his plans for leaving the country soon. After a few weeks, when it became inconvenient to maintain Bhaktivedanta Swami at the apartment, Dr. Mishra shifted him to his Hatha Yoga studio on the 5th floor of 100 West 72nd Street near Central Park. The large studio was located in the center of the building and included an office and an adjoining private room where Bhaktivedanta Swami stayed. It had no windows. Philosophically, at complete odds with Bhaktivedanta Swami, Dr. Mishra accepted the absolute truth in the impersonal feature, or Brahman, to be supreme. Bhaktivedanta Swami stressed the supremacy of the personal feature, or Bhagavan, following the Vedic theistic philosophy that the most complete understanding of the absolute truth is personal. The Bhagavad Gita says that the impersonal Brahman is subordinate to Bhagavan and is an emanation from him, just as the sunshine is an emanation from the sun planet. This conclusion had been taught by the leading traditional acharyas of ancient India, such as Ramanuja and Madhva. Dr. Mishra, on the other hand, followed Shankara, who taught that the impersonal presence of the absolute truth is all in all, and that the personality of Godhead is ultimately an illusion. Whereas Bhaktivedanta Swami's theistic philosophy accepted the individual spiritual self, Atma, as an eternal servant of the supreme spiritual being, Bhagavan. Dr. Mishra's view accepted the spiritual self as an individual. Rather, his idea was that Dr. Mishra's view accepted the spiritual self as not an individual. Rather, his idea was that since each person is identical with God, the Supreme Brahman, there is no need to worship God outside oneself. As Dr. Mishra would put it, everything is one. Sab kuch ek hai. This is a philosophy many people follow. Impersonal philosophy. Bhaktivedanta Swami challenged, if each one of us is actually supreme, then why this supreme is suffering and struggling in the material world? Dr. Mishra would counter that the Supreme is only temporarily covered by illusion, and that through Hatha Yoga and meditation one would become enlightened, understanding it is all the Supreme. Bhaktivedanta Swami would again challenge, but if the Supreme could be covered by illusion, then illusion would be greater than God, greater than the Supreme. Bhaktivedanta Swami considered Dr. Mishra a Mayavadi because of his inadvertent acceptance that Maya, illusion, is greater than the absolute truth. So, who is a Mayavadi? One who says that Maya is greater than God. He is called Mayavadi. So, these people say when God comes to this material world, he also comes under Maya. That means Maya is greater than God. No? That is their understanding. But actually, it's not a fact. Maya is always subservient to God. That is the right philosophy. For Bhaktivedanta Swami, not only was the impersonal philosophy unpalatable, it was an insult to the personality of Godhead. A mendicant, Bhaktivedanta Swami was temporarily dependent on the goodwill of his Mayavadi acquaintance, with whom he regularly ate and conversed, and from whom he accepted shelter. But what a great inconvenience it was. He had come to America to speak purely and boldly about Krishna, but he was being restricted. In Butler, he had been confined with his hoarse middle class sensibilities. Now he was silenced in a different way. He was treated with kindness, but he was considered a threat. Dr. Mishra could not allow his students to hear the exclusive praise of Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On November 8, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote to his god brother Tirtha Maharaj, who had become the president of Gaudiya Math, to remind him that their spiritual master Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had a strong desire to open preaching centers in the western countries. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had several times attempted to do this by sending sannyasis to England and other European countries, but Bhaktivedanta Swami noted without any tangible results. Bhaktivedanta Swami pointed out that there were certain Mayavadi groups who had buildings but were not attracting many followers. But he had talked with Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, who had given the opinion that Americans would be inclined to Bhakti Yoga. If the leaders of the Gaudiya Math would consider opening their own branch in New York, Bhaktivedanta Swami would be willing to manage it. But without their own house, he reported, they could not conduct a mission in the city. Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote that they could open centers in many cities throughout the country if his god brothers would cooperate. He repeatedly made the point that although other groups did not have the genuine spiritual philosophy of India, they were buying many buildings. The Gaudiya Math, however, had nothing. 3 weeks later, Bhaktivedanta Swami received Tirtha Maharaja's reply. Bhaktivedanta Swami had explained his hopes and plans for staying in America, but he had stressed that his god brothers would have to give him their vote of confidence as well as some tangible support. His god brothers had not been working cooperatively. Each leader was interested more in maintaining his own building than in working with the others to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya around the world. So, how would it be possible for them to share Bhaktivedanta Swami's vision of establishing a branch in New York City? They would see it as his separate attempt. Yet, despite the unlikely odds, he appealed to their missionary spirit and reminded them of the desires of their spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Their Guru Maharaj wanted Krishna consciousness to be spread in the West. But when Bhaktivedanta Swami finally got Tirtha Maharaja's reply, he found it unfavorable. His god brother did not argue against his attempting something in New York, but he politely said that the Gaudiya Math's funds could not be used for such a proposal. So, we'll close here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we see here, Srila Prabhupada went to the West. He was living with that Mayavadi yoga teacher, Dr. Mishra. And whenever Prabhupada got an opportunity, he would speak about Krishna consciousness. But Dr. Mishra was unhappy with this because he thought his students will get influenced by the Bhakti Yoga method talked about by Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, intelligently, he asked Prabhupada to stay not with him. He gave a separate place, a yoga studio to stay. And then Prabhupada wrote a letter to his god brother Tirtha Maharaj, who was in India at that time, asking for the help of some funds. He said in America, we have opportunity. There are people who can hear about Bhakti Yoga, take up Krishna consciousness, and this was the desire of our spiritual master. So please help me with some devotees and with some funds. But he got a negative reply. So we see in the beginning so many setbacks for Prabhupada, right? So let us continue to read. Later we'll see what, in spite of so many setbacks, how Prabhupada was successful in establishing a worldwide Krishna consciousness movement. Please distribute the beads. Any questions?
Unless he could show some tangible output in the new society, then how can somebody accept his proposal of establishing something? Because there are, in India, for example, many startups are there, so they ask government funds and they fail also. So nobody wants to take risk in a emerging economy or a developing kind of thing. So at that time, the Bhaktivedanta Institute also was developing, so how could they take risk? That's why I think they did not promote it.
Maybe, but he wrote letter to his own god brother, who was a devotee, who knew that Krishna consciousness will be well established in the Western world, because his guru had told him. Srila Prabhupada's guru was also the guru of Tirtha Maharaj, to whom Prabhupada wrote letter. And it was the desire of his guru to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So he should have actually helped, because it is his own guru's order, but he didn't help. He thought some other things are important. Right? So whenever we see great personalities struggling, we should know that Krishna is just testing them, testing how determined and how serious they are. Just like Prahlad Maharaj was tested. Prahlad was tested in so many ways, but he was determined. So when one is determined amidst all difficulties, then Krishna will make impossible things happen through them. That we will see as we read the book. Is it okay? Okay. So let us now chant. Your first time you are chanting on the beads, right? On the beads. You chanted earlier also. Okay. So let us all chant. We use the beads in this way. Rest the beads on the middle finger. We don't use this finger. Yeah. So we use only the middle finger and the thumb. Okay. And then move the beads towards yourself. Go to the second bead, third bead. On each bead we chant the complete mantra. Okay. First we'll chant the invocation prayer. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So let us chant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.